stage, Wright Lassiter III.
Good morning. Well, we've had a really rousing panel thus far. As you've heard, I'm Wright Lassiter, and I'm new to Detroit as the incoming CEO of Henry Ford Health System. But I'm not new to the topic we're going to be talking about in a moment, race and sports. So we're going to engage in what I believe will be a very interesting conversation and really important conversation that I hope you will also agree with. Would just share a little of my background with you. I grew up in Tuskegee, Alabama in the early mid-60s and 70s. I played basketball at Lemoyne College, a Jesuit college in Syracuse, New York, and was coached by a guy that some of you may have heard of, John Beeline. And for the last 25, 26 years, I've been running healthcare systems in urban environments in Dallas, Texas, and Fort Worth, Texas, and Oakland, California, and now since January in Detroit, Michigan. So I think that those experiences will give me a little bit of perspective as I try to moderate a panel to talk a bit about the impact of sports and race. Today we're going to talk about a topic framed in the context from an expat of Detroit, Stephen Ross, a name that many of you may know. Stephen is best known for lots of things. He's best known as a significant philanthropist with the University of Michigan, giving him a very large gift, totals over $300 million. As you heard earlier, he is a real estate developer and is in the process of developing what will be the largest real estate development project in New York City, the Hudson Yards. And many people know of him as the owner of the Miami Dolphins. I think in that role, many of us have heard of Stephen and is aware of the challenges that he faced as the owner of a team that had some significant issues as it relates to the impact of race in sports. And Stephen would have liked to have been with us today, but his Dolphins are playing in London this weekend, and I think as an appropriate, accountable owner, he decided that being with the team in London was probably more important than being with us in Detroit, and I think we probably all agree with that. But he has a big idea that he wants to talk a bit about, and so for the next few minutes, I'm going to show you a video that he put together. And as he reflects, as a result of issues in his locker room in 2013, he really did some soul searching and was both frustrated and motivated. And I think when you think about leadership is not just about understanding what problems exist, but leadership is generally about action. And then most importantly, leadership's around creating solutions that solve problems. And so he has a solution that he is hoping will solve a problem. And he has formed a new nonprofit that's going to focus on sports as a way to both galvanize youth and address issues that underpin what he thinks and what I think many people believe are important issues around race in this country. And so he calls his new initiative RISE, the Ross Institute for Sports and Equality. And as you'll see in the video, he was both inspired and prompted into action, not only around what he saw happening in his own locker room, but also by a recent visit that he had to Detroit, looking at what had happened to his hometown in the many years since he had left. And while there was significant, I think we'd all agree, significant improvement and resurgence in Detroit, he was really troubled by much of what he saw. So let's watch the video, and then after the video, we're going to have a large number of folks who have some perspective on sports, have some perspective on sports and race, and will give their views of how maybe we can use sports to improve race relations in our communities.
We all know that I had this problem in Miami with incognito, with dealing with the lack of respect the players had for each other, and there was investigation. And as we looked into it, I saw it as kind of a product of racism and something that's always troubled me. What really brought it to a head in my mind is that I was also going to be questioned by the investigator. Or the day before, on that Friday, I was in Detroit with the governor and brought the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. They took me on a tour after and hadn't been back in Detroit and really seen the downtown or, in-town areas. And tears came to my eyes, remembering Detroit as I saw it. Can't grow up in Detroit and not be a great sports fan. And I was very fortunate that I attended regularly Lions, Tigers, Red Wing games. Probably the greatest moments were going to Tiger Stadium in the 54, 55, and 57 and seeing them win the World Championship. Going to hockey games and, with Gordie Howe and Olympia and winning all those championships. There's nothing like winning that brings, a community together, that create those memorable moments. And I think that's what's so great about sports. And it's really, as an owner, this is what you want to do and create something. It's like owning a utility. You're really doing something that's in the benefit of the community. When you're in a position that you can really affect change and you have the ability to do it, and having the situation I had in Miami, I could either bury my head in the sand or I could use that as an example to do something, positively. I elected for the latter. Sport really is the common denominator in the world. It brings us all together. And if there's any place where there's equality, it's really in sports. And no one has really ever used sports as a place that you can create change. And I think that in using it as an example, how people do get along, that's really was the genesis of setting up RISE. And I went through different iterations and different ideas as I talked to people. But I really think that we can create a lot of change and a lot of positive, knowing the impact of sports. And it really starts when people start playing sports and recognizing that athletes are all role models, no matter what level of school you're in. I mean, when you're in the 4th grade and you're a great athlete, you're a role model for the rest of the students there. It's a question of really educating them and really setting a standard of what is expected and the way they treat each other and the respect that people have and should have, and hopefully that'll have an impact on society.
So you're all quiet after watching that video. I think it's always interesting that, again, as I mentioned, leadership happens in lots of ways. And oftentimes you see the best of leaders when they're challenged. And so this is the case where Stephen took a challenge head on and is looking to do something really quite positive. As you will see, we have an illustrious panel in front of you. It's a panel that I think will do a fabulous job at addressing the issues in front of us. You all have their bios in front of you, so I will just name them. Some of them need almost no introduction, but I will just name them and will refer to your guide regarding their bio. To my left, we have Ndidi Massay. Ndidi is the CEO of RISE, the organization that I mentioned to you regarding Stephen Ross's latest brainchild. Next to Ndidi is someone that most of you know well, Dave Bing, former mayor and NBA Hall of Famer. To his left, I was telling Dave earlier that it's rare that I feel small, but I did just a few minutes ago when I was talking with the Iceman, George Gervin, who you all know as NBA Hall of Famer. Next to George is Lauryn Williams. Lauryn and I spent some time together last night talking about the panel and talking about her perspectives. And as you'll see in her bio, she is an accomplished sprinter and bobsledder. And she was the first American to win an Olympic medal in both summer and winter games. And I think one of only 6 in the world at the time. So I'm not sure how many there are today, but very, very accomplished. I would ask you not to race her back to your car. She will win. She will win. Next to Lauryn is Tim Richey. Tim is the CEO of Detroit PAL, and we'll spend some time talking with with him about his organization and a little bit about a burgeoning partnership between Detroit PAL and RISE. And last but clearly not least is a newcomer to Detroit, Arn Tellem. Arn is the vice chairman of Palace Sports and Entertainment, which you know is the umbrella organization that owns the Pistons and owns a number of entertainment venues here. He has been here all of 3 weeks, and so I was sharing with him that I was on a panel recently as a newcomer, and the moderator blasted me first with the first question about my impression of Detroit. And I told him that to give him a break as another newcomer to Detroit, I would ask him questions last. So Arn will be our last and our cleanup hitter. So let me turn to you, Ndidi, as the CEO of RISE, as the individual charged with executing, implementing on a vision that Stephen laid out in the video. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your perspectives on RISE and what you hope to accomplish?
All right. Well, first of all, good morning, everyone. And on behalf of Steve Dross and RISE, thank you for having us here. Really, our mission, and I think you already touched on it a little bit, right, is to use sport as a vehicle for social change. And very specifically, the social change we're going after is race relations. Steve is definitely, as you said, a leader and about the solution. And the power of sport, we think, has a very unique way of uniting people of all ages, all genders, all races, socioeconomics. I mean, when your team is in the playoffs or in the World Series or in the Super Bowl, it's amazing to see all the people come together and people, giving each other high fives, celebrating. So we really want to use the power of sport to help unite. Our approach is really three-pronged. We are planning to have a public awareness campaign, which will include some PSAs. We are planning an entire educational program. We're working with diversity experts across the country to really focus on educating our youth. And then the third way we want to approach this is with strategic partnerships. And one of our strategic partners is here, Tim Richey, and the Detroit Police Athletic League. We are also having conversations with the University of Michigan, Michigan State, Wayne State, the Michigan High School Athletic Association. So Steve is looking to come back and make an impact in the state of Michigan.
Great, thank you. So, Detroit clearly has a history of using sports in a lot of powerful ways. 1968, the Detroit Tigers won the World Series, and many people believe that was a uniting force for the city, a city that had been ravaged by riots in '67. In 1969, Detroit Police Athletic League was founded, and as I was reading up about PAL, I noted that at one point in time we had 30,000 kids participating in PAL, and today we have about 12,000. Tim, why don't you talk a little bit about PAL and what you all are trying to accomplish, and maybe talk more about the partnership you think will come out of the RISE PAL collaboration.
Sure, thanks so much. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having us here. This is a really important topic, and I'm excited to be here. Detroit PAL has been around since 1969, right, like since you mentioned, and it was formed after the riots, and it was formed as a means to bring police officers in the community together in a positive relationship, and it was really designed to give kids positive after-school activities and something that they, an outlet to get rid of some of that energy that they had and meet caring adults and really create some of those positive relationships. It's a critically important institution in the city of Detroit. We count probably close to 200,000 PAL alumni that are out there. Everywhere we go, people talk about their experience with Detroit PAL and what Detroit PAL meant to them. Like you mentioned, today we serve over 12,000 kids throughout the city. We've got 106 school partners. We've got a PAL participant in every single school in the city of Detroit. It's a huge network of families across the city. And really our mission is to develop character in those kids. For us, sports is a means to attract individuals and bring kids together and teach them about teamwork and sportsmanship, and also valuing diversity and valuing the difference in other people. And so for us, it's really a chance to create those positive experiences for kids, one that's critically important to the lives of the children. So when Ndidi called and had an opportunity to partner with RISE, it was really an easy answer for us. I mean, the idea of a group bringing in sort of national expertise in training folks in how to use sports to combat something as deep-seated as racism, And we all know that Detroit, whether we want to admit it or not, is one of the most polarized regions in the country. And a lot of Detroit's problems were created and generated by this racism seed that we have never been able to address. And so with 12,000 Detroit PAL kids and families, and the hundreds of thousands of kids that are playing sports across the state, what a great way for Detroit PAL, in a partnership with Wright, to spearhead this kind of a conversation. So not only working with our kids that participate with us, but bringing the suburban teams into this conversation as well. So part of the partnership is going to drive these competitions between Detroit PAL kids, baseball, basketball, football, soccer, what have you, and bring in some of these suburban teams of kids that don't look like me, but have a lot of commonalities that they've never been able to share. So, you know, it's exciting for us, and we can't wait to get started.
Great. Thank you for sharing. Lauryn, I want to turn to you next. So Lauryn retired in 2014, I believe, from professional sports. She spent her life training at the top of her game in 2 different sports. I'm still envious of two different sports at that level. Maybe I'd like you to talk a little bit, Lauryn, if you would, about your reaction to Stephen Ross's proposal. And then after we hear those comments, I want to share a brief conversation that Lauryn and I had last night that I think will be provocative, and I'd like you to talk a little about that, but I won't divulge that conversation yet. Why don't you just talk a little bit about your perspectives of RISE and how you think that might be able to have an impact on change and race using sports as a foundation?
I think that RISE is an excellent organization to bring about change. I think that we're at a pivotal point where we really have to take advantage of what message we're sending children right now. Generations prior to mine, I might be kind of going in the last.
That's all right, go ahead, go right ahead.
But generations prior to mine, I think, experienced racism on a much more direct level. I would describe myself as not having experienced racism, and the generations that are behind me not having experienced racism, but are being told about racism more so, and seeing racism and the perception being put on television and media and things like that. I don't think that they're actually experiencing racism on a daily basis or direct and upfront and in their faces. I think that the main thing that we have to do is change the message that we're giving the kids. We're at a very pivotal point where we've got to be excited about, let's get these kids together, let's integrate, let's have the suburban kids and the inner city kids all in one place, because the kids don't notice. If you don't tell them, they don't know that there's necessarily a difference. And I think that people believe that because that's how they grew up, where they knew there was a distinct difference. There's black, there's white, there's this, there's that. Kids don't recognize that nowadays, and parents are telling them that. So if we take advantage right now of this pivotal time where we can be just 1 or 2 generations away from maybe, racism being something that's in the back burner instead of something that's at the forefront of how we're making relations in the United States and worldwide even.
Great, thank you, Lauryn. So, George Gervin needs a little introduction for lots of things that he's done, sports and otherwise. As I was reading a bit about him, I read that George's sister, Barbara, attended last year's homecoming and was very moved by what was happening and this sort of notion of bringing expats to impact Detroit in a really significant way. I also read a story about your brother having some positive impact from PAL as he grew up. So George, why don't you provide a little Iceman wisdom for us on the role of sports with race, your thoughts about how individuals of your stature can have impact, and anything else you might want to share with us in terms of what you and your sister are doing.
Well, I think we're all starting to really realize how important sports is. I'm a product of Detroit. I mean, I went to elementary school here, middle school, high school, graduated from here. I was here in '67 during the riots. So I saw how the city was tore up, and I saw in '68 how when the Tigers won it all, how it brought everybody together. So I know how powerful, sports can be. We done created programs in San Antonio for the last 20 years. I have 2 charter schools. We're trying to have a positive impact on young people. I always tell people, my sister is the CEO, so she the brains. I'm the brand. So you're able to use my brand to create opportunities to get indoors that may not have been open because of my involvement in sports. It's a very powerful tool that we got to continue to use. One thing about my sport, meaning basketball, it's a team sport. Black guys, white guys, European guys. If you have the same goal, and that's to win, you bring it together, and you win. So you don't really look at your race. And where I come from, since I am a little older, that's what it's all about. It's all about us winning. So we got to use whatever we can to have a positive impact on young people's lives, and sports is the tool that we can use.
Great. So everyone up here has been wildly successful in multiple ventures. Ndidi, I want to come back to you. I read comments that you made as someone was profiling your career and your career successes, and you said, quote, "The reason I'm a successful executive today is because of what I learned in sports," end quote. So talk a little bit about how important you think it is for young men and women to be exposed to the values that I think are similar to what George was just referencing, but give your perspective on that.
Right. Well, I got my opportunity to go to college, quite frankly, because I was a good softball player. So had I not been a good softball player and the full ride opportunity, I was able to attend Northwestern University and go to their journalism school, which was ranked 2 in the country, and this incredible opportunity in front of me for a girl from California with a single mom who could barely pay our bills. So I think number 1, sports gives opportunities. And then number 2, I just think all the life skills you learn through sports, you can transfer into life. Teamwork, discipline, leadership, preparation, dealing with obstacles, learning how to win, learning how to lose. Some people always say that sports builds character. I believe sports reveals character. I think, when sort of the going gets tough, you see people's characters, and you see how a team can either come together and do very well or not. So I really think, teamwork is probably the most important for me, and then that sort of brings back to race and to differences, to socioeconomic differences, to religious differences, that you have to work together as a team to win. And, you don't have to be best friends, you don't have to love each other, but you have to have respect, and you have to treat folks with dignity, and you have to be able to pull it together.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. So, I've had a really incredible opportunity over the last number of months to get to know former Mayor Dave Bing, a gentleman that I have enormous respect for all the things that he has done and is doing to make a positive impact in this world. As you know, professional basketball player, did interning at a bank to learn finance, did some interning at a steel company before deciding, I think I can do it better than the guys that are running a company, and let me go start my own company. And then when many people would pass along things to their kids and would spend a lot of time in the Caribbean or in Mexico or in Europe or wherever, he decides, well, maybe I'll just run the city for a little while because I don't have anything going on Monday through Friday. So Dave, you clearly have a lot of perspective both on sports and on its impact on race, but also very specifically on what's happening here in Detroit. So why don't you share some of your views about what you're doing with your Youth Institute and how we can do more to use sports to impact race?
Thank you, and good morning to all. Let me just digress for a moment, if I can, and go back. I am not a Detroiter, meaning that I wasn't born here, I wasn't raised here, but I came here at the age of 22, and I've never left. So Detroit is home for me. As a kid growing up, from the kindergarten through the 12th grade, I went to public schools in Washington, D.C., and never saw anybody who didn't look like me. As a student, as an administrator, as a teacher, everybody was African American. And I decided, leaving high school, to go to a college that had 14,000 students, 100 black students, 80 were male, and 70 of us were athletes. I had one teammate who was African American, and what George said earlier is that in sports, you don't worry about color, you don't worry about race. We all have one thing in common, one goal in common, and that is to compete and win. And all my 12 years in the NBA, that's what it was all about. But as I look at Detroit, I was here in '66 when I came in '68. I saw what the Tigers did in terms of bringing our city back together. And I've seen our city torn apart over the years, and I'm so happy that so many of you are coming back to see the progress that's being made all over the city. We got a long ways to go. There's a lot of work to be done. And as you listen to everybody that's up here on this panel, they talk about the positive things that are happening in Detroit and what you as expats need to do to help us with the momentum that's been started. You know, kids are the key. I saw a little bit early on in the education conversation, and if we don't properly educate our kids, the progress and the momentum that we have is going to come to a screeching halt, and we can't allow that to happen. Education is extremely important. I think George and I in particular, and maybe you, Lauren, we got our opportunities from an education standpoint through sports. You know, we had a chance to get scholarships and, you know, show our wares to the world. But long story short, none of us are stopping with the success that we've had. We're all trying to give back in different kinds of ways. Today, I'm trying to give back with youth in a mentoring program where there are men and boys of color that are having major problems in our society, not just in Detroit. So last year, I started a mentoring program with 7th, 8th, and 9th grade boys in Detroit Public Schools. We now have 65 boys, and the key for these boys' success is to put them with a man of color. So we now have about 71 men that we've matched up with these boys, and I want to thank you for helping me get some of our mentors. Thank you very much. But we're going to continue down this path. We're going to work with Tim. We're going to work with any organization that we can, because we think that if we can get these boys early enough, teach them and expose them, they'll have a chance to be successful in life.
Great, thank you, Dave. So Lauren, I want to come back to you and just share with the audience the comments that you made. So as Lauren and I were talking last night, she said to me, you know, maybe we are a generation or two away from race having to be an issue. And I said, really? And so I said, tell me more. And clearly, we're in a very polarized time in this country for lots of reasons. And that manifests itself in cities like Detroit. But it's very interesting hearing the perspective of if you don't mind me saying this, of a 30-something who talks a lot about how our kids are growing up and how for some of them race is not a direct issue for them. May or may not mean it's not an indirect or covert issue. But give us more of your perspective, because I thought that'd be a little provocative for maybe the panel and the audience this morning, for someone to espouse that maybe we're a generation or two away from this issue of race not being an issue. So tell us more about that.
It's pretty much like I was telling you guys before. Like I feel like, and I said this is just my perspective, but that what we're getting is a message from media. I'll give an example. I mentor a set of little girls in Miami, Florida, and one of them I was saying, how are your grades going? How's everything, school been going? And she said, man, the white man's still trying to hold me down. And I said, what? She's 16 years old. And I said, what do you mean by that? And she was like, you know what I mean? And I was like, no, I don't. Explain that to me. And she was like, well, that's just what they say. So she has no idea. You know, she lives in a black community. She doesn't have any real examples of any racism that's happened to her. She's just hearing that message. She's hearing that message on television. She's hearing that message from, you know, her grandparents and things like that. It's not something that she's actually experienced. And I said, I'm gonna give you a couple of days and you come back to me and you tell me ways that you feel like white people are holding you down. And she came back to me and she didn't have any answers, and she actually apologized for having said that, and you know, we had a talk. But I get examples like that all the time. And I was raised here in Detroit until I was age 12, and the only white people I was exposed to were my teachers at my Catholic school and one of my mother's friends, and his name was Rick Brode, and he gave me $100 when I got straight A's on my report card, so I didn't know anything but to like white people. This is awesome. But then I moved. My dad got really sick, and my mom and dad had split, so I went to live in Pennsylvania, and I was the only black girl in my graduating class. So I did notice that I was different immediately, having grown up in inner city Detroit, but I didn't feel like I stood out. I ended up being the class president all 4 years of high school, where I was, like I said, the only black girl in my graduating class, and I never felt different. So I think it's a matter of, like I said, what message is being received from, like I said, the generation above, your parents and or your grandparents, by what they experienced. It's not something that and I'm not saying that no one is experiencing it, but it's not something that we're experiencing directly. And so if we really change the message that's out there, that there is this black-white divide, we can really do something. And that's what it is. It's going to be social media. It's going to be the perception. It's going to be the branding of what the race relations are now. Because you're also getting this melting pot of people. You know, there's black and white. You know, you meet somebody and you say, what are you? And they're like, oh, my mom is Asian and my dad is Polish. Or, you're getting all kinds of different things. It's not just a black-white mixed person anymore. There's all kinds of different mixes that are happening. So we really focus on that, and that we are just a people all on one team. I think that we will be just 1 or 2 generations away from race being a non-issue.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for that. So just note, Lauryn, the applause after your commentary. I would just leave it at that. Arn, you've been sitting here patiently listening to your colleagues talk a bit about their perspectives on sports and race. As Vice Chairman of Palace Sports and Entertainment, you have a significant role in your company, obviously, and have some interesting perspectives on professional sports teams, and I guess you say now professional sports conglomerates, because many sports teams aren't just sports teams anymore. So talk a little bit about your perspectives, having both the professional athletes at your disposal, having the resources of a large conglomerate of sports and entertainment at your disposal. And as I understand, you're charged with looking at how you can connect your organization more with the city of Detroit. So talk a bit about your perspective on race and sports. Be happy to respond to any comments you've heard, as well as what you're trying to accomplish with PSE.
Well, first, let me say, on my 3-week anniversary of being here, I'm thrilled to be in Detroit, and the one thing I sense immediately from all the people I've met, and I've had literally now a lot of meetings, is that there is a real spirit here of coming together for the common good, and that is the essence of sports and what a sports team tries to do. And you feel that here in the business community and with the civic leaders that I've met, and it's really inspiring. And sports teams serve that purpose. I think sports is often a harbinger of the issues in our society and brings them to light. And this issue that we're discussing today is really the central one, is how do you bring people together? And a team is a unifying force in the community, and it really can bring people together. It's a powerful tool. Professional sports teams are community assets, and so we have a tremendous opportunity before us to serve the city, the metropolitan area, and the state of Michigan. And I think that was one of the things that most interested me in taking this job, is that opportunity. And I was so inspired by what some of the people here are doing. We have a great governor, an excellent mayor who are from different political parties. They're working together, they're coming together, and I think they're an example for our country to solve problems. And we have business leaders and civic leaders and all people in the community really coming together to do that. And sports teaches the most important value is responsibility. I think it's being responsible to, like Lauryn said, to your career, and what George said, your teammates, your organization, and your community. And that's what we're trying to harness and support organizations like PAL and others. The NBA in particular, I think, is the best served to do this. The NBA has been at the forefront of, as a leader in dealing with the issues that confront our society, under the leadership starting really with David Stern and now with Adam Silver. So I think they have made an effort, and it's a global sport. The sport is played, it's of the American sports, the American team sports, it's a sport that's played all around the world. And I've seen its profound impact as I've traveled the world, meeting athletes and serving on boards, trying to use basketball as a bridge to bring kids together in warring regions. So I'm on the board of an organization, Seeds of Peace and Peace Players, that in particular uses basketball as a tool to bring kids together in Belfast after the peace accords for Catholic and Protestant kids, and in South Africa, and in Jerusalem, where they're bringing Israeli and Palestinian kids together in after-school programs. And one of the things that I was amazed over, for 15 years, I brought NBA players to a camp in Maine where they bring kids from these areas of conflict, particularly the Middle East. And a kid from Chicago, an NBA player from Chicago who sat on these coexistence sessions among these kids. And you gotta remember, when they go to this camp in Maine, it's the first time that an Israeli and Palestinian all of a sudden are thrown into a bunk. They never really talk about meeting someone from another race. They're now sleeping in a bunk for 3 weeks together and sharing their experiences, and they never had any interaction before, and they're coming from a warring region. And so an NBA player said to me, I thought we had it bad in Chicago until I saw these kids. And so sports is that great thing. And the kids from Israel or Palestine or Belfast or South Africa, when they meet an NBA player like Derrick Rose or Russell Westbrook, they are in awe of these athletes. The impact that a professional athlete can make is incredible. They are true heroes that transcend their city, our country. They're known all over the world, and they have a tremendous opportunity to make an impact. So when you factor all that in, I'm excited to be here. I think the Pistons have a great opportunity to really be part of this community and make a real difference and support all the great efforts. And I think that's really one of our primary missions is to do that, and I'm happy to be here to support that.
Great, wonderful. Well, and I'll tell you, I won't ask any questions. You've only been here 3 weeks, so I'll ask no questions about when the Pistons are okay, never mind. I won't ask that question. You guys know what I was going to ask, right? So, okay. So those who are looking at me saying, what are you talking about? I've heard a lot. So I will tell you that I'm a season ticket holder. My wife and I are big basketball fans, and so we have a very profound impact on professional sports teams. Just so you know, Arn, we bought our first season tickets for the Warriors 4 years ago. Look what happened. So we bought our first tickets for the Pistons just now. So I'm expecting a championship in 3 to 4 years. All right, I'm just saying. All right, so we only have a couple minutes left. Any parting comments? You all have been a great panel, giving perspectives, talking about sports as a level playing field, talking about the impact of team, talking about a vision for the future of maybe not having to have this conversation in a generation or so, talking about how a transplanted Detroiter can have incredible impact, talking about a former great softball player who turned attorney, turned CEO of Rise to make an incredible impact across the country. You've had some really incredible comments and thoughts. In the closing seconds, anyone have a parting comment or thought to share with the audience before we close this down?
Well, I can say something, and I say it because I have an opportunity to sit next to, my hero. When I was coming up here in Detroit, Dave coached me in my high school all-star game. Wow. And I became MVP. And Dave told me, boy, if you keep playing like you playing, you're going to play against me. Now, I was a kid, and he told me that, and I was able to make it to the NBA. So that's the power of sports, and that's the power of influence from a sports hero. So I think we're on the right track.
Absolutely.
Here's an untold story in Detroit, and it's about basketball. There was a place in Detroit on the northwest side called St. Cecilia. All right, 100, and I told this to Arn, 108 players who played at St. Cecilia made it to the NBA.
Wow.
108. And so the NBA ought to be staying in Detroit so they can figure out over the next few years how many more guys are going to come out of Detroit and go into the NBA.
Absolutely.
I played basketball at St. Cecilia, and I actually did grow up wanting sitting a bench on senior night at a basketball game is when I realized I probably wasn't going to be a basketball player. I should look at something else. But Detroit is hoops, and we know hoops, and we're excited about hoops. But I think that we also need to bring some of the Olympic sports to Detroit. And I think that we could really benefit from the diversity in sports to give some of the other kids that, you know, aren't going to be hoop stars. Like, I wasn't going to be a hoop star. I needed something else to do. But bringing Olympic sports and giving them some diversity and what to choose from, and we can bring a lot more athletes. We can have a lot more athletes coming out of Detroit in years to come in all these different other sports that are available, because there's lots of options.
Absolutely. Great. All right. Any other parting comments? If not, join me in thanking our panel.
Thank you. Outstanding. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Stephen Henderson.